The husband cheats and abandons his wife, but she becomes beautiful and marries a millionaire CEO. It was a typical late afternoon in a quiet Connecticut suburb. Golden sunlight painted the facades of the identical houses, creating an air of perfection. Clara Sullivan watched the wall clock in the kitchen as she set the dinner table. The plates were lined up, the napkins impeccably folded, and the smell of roasting meat wafted through the house. Her children, Liam and Sophia, were playing in the living room, laughing carefree. It was a scene that anyone would say was perfect, a close-knit family, a comfortable life. But Clara felt something different in the air, a restlessness she couldn't explain. The clock struck 7:30 p.m. and Victor, her husband, still hadn't arrived. He was usually punctual, especially on Fridays, when the family used to have dinner together. Clara tried to shake off the annoyance and picked up the phone to call him, but it rang several times before falling into voicemail. "He must be stuck in traffic," she muttered to herself, trying to convince herself. When Victor finally arrived, it was just after 9 p.m. He rushed in with a loose tie and a strange perfume mixed with the smell of alcohol. Clara watched him closely as he took off his jacket and avoided crossing eyes with her. He seemed agitated, but tried to feign normality. "Sorry I'm late, work was crazy today," he said without offering any further explanation. Clara didn't insist. She didn't want to fight, especially with the children around, but the restlessness inside her was growing. There was something out of place, something she couldn't name, but which left her with a heavy heart. The next morning, Clara decided to organize the house. It was something she did when she needed to clear her head. In Victor's office, while sorting through papers, something caught her eye. A receipt from a luxury hotel in the city. Her heart raced. It was a receipt for dinner for two, dated the night before. The bill included champagne and a dessert she knew Victor hated. Clara felt her hands tremble as she held the paper. She tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a business dinner. Maybe there was an explanation. But why wouldn't he mention it? Why would he lie? The rest of the day was a blur. Clara tried to act normally with the children, but her heart was in pieces. When Victor came home that evening, she confronted him, holding up the receipt as proof. "What's this, Victor? Are you going to tell me that champagne and exotic desserts are part of business meetings now?" Victor turned pale. For a moment he tried to deny it, but the pressure in the air was unbearable. Finally he sighed and said, "Clara, I think we need to talk." What came next destroyed everything Clara had believed. Victor admitted that he was involved with another woman, someone he had met at work, someone who made him feel alive again. His words cut like a knife. "I love you, Clara, but not in the way I should. I no longer know who I am in this perfect life you've created." Clara couldn't believe what she was hearing. For 12 years, she had devoted herself entirely to her family. She had abandoned her own dreams to support his. She had built the life he now called suffocating. "So you're going to throw it all away? You're going to destroy our family on a whim?" Victor didn't answer. He simply packed some clothes into a suitcase and left that evening, leaving Clara alone with the children. The following weeks were hell. Clara tried to keep her composure for her children, but every day was a struggle. The bills began to pile up. The money Victor sent was insufficient, and Clara realized how much she depended on him. With a heavy heart, she started looking for jobs, something she hadn't done since college. But the job market wasn't kind. Clara was a 34-year-old woman with no recent experience, trying to compete with young people full of energy and qualifications. After a series of rejections, she was about to give up when, by chance, she found an old sketchbook. Before getting married, Clara had a passion for fashion design. She dreamed of creating clothes that told stories, but abandoned this dream to look after her family. Now, looking at those old drawings, something inside her has rekindled. Maybe I can start again. Maybe there's still time. Clara began to draw again. In the evenings, after the children had gone to bed, she would spread out papers on the kitchen table and let her creativity flow. In the midst of difficulties, drawing became her refuge. One day, while delivering CVs to offices around the city, Clara had an unexpected encounter. She was in a cafe, revising a makeshift portfolio of her drawings, when a man approached her. He was elegant, confident, and had an attentive gaze. "Did you draw that?" he asked, pointing to the open notebook on the table. Clara hesitated before answering. "Yes, they're just old ideas, nothing professional." Well, I'm Leonard Hayes, CEO of Hayes Industries. We're always looking for new talent. Would you like a chance? Clara almost couldn't believe her ears. It was an unexpected opportunity, something she hadn't even known was possible. But at the same time, something about Leonard seemed mysterious, as if he was hiding more than he was revealing. As Clara accepted the invitation, her heart was torn between hope and fear. She didn't know that this meeting would change her life forever. Clara was paralyzed for a few seconds after hearing Leonard Hayes' proposal. There he was, standing in front of her, a man who exuded elegance in a tailored suit that looked like it cost more than she would earn in a year. If she had a job, of course. His name sounded familiar. Of course, she had heard of Leonard Hayes before. He was the CEO of one of the largest fashion companies in the country. The kind of man Clara never imagined would even be in the same environment as her, let alone interested in the scribblings in an old notebook she carried around as a desperate attempt to keep her dream alive. "Look for me in my office tomorrow morning," he said, sliding a business card across the table towards Clara. His voice was calm but firm, and his eyes, although gentle, showed an intensity that made her hesitate. "I want to know more about you, and about what you can do." Clara swallowed, feeling her heartbeat accelerate. It was as if an invisible hand had taken the floor out from under her. Was it a joke, a blow, or worse still, was he being polite, just making a gesture so as not to hurt the stranger with an amateur portfolio? Before she could express any doubts, Leonard stood up and adjusted his wristwatch. "But remember," he added, looking her straight in the eye, "talent is important, but determination is what really makes someone succeed. I hope you surprise me." With those words, he left the cafe, leaving Clara alone, with her business card in one hand and her cup of cold coffee in the other. Clara spent the rest of the day in a whirlwind of thoughts. It was as if, for a brief moment, the open wounds left by Victor had stopped hurting, only to be replaced by a growing anxiety. What if she wasn't good enough? What if Leonard was just playing with her? In the evenings, as she washed the dishes after dinner with the children, the doubts consumed her. She didn't have a degree in fashion, just a basic course taken many years ago. She had no real experience in the market. Her designs, although they meant a lot to her, were just reflections of forgotten dreams. But Clara knew she couldn't let the opportunity slip away. After all, what did she have to lose? That night, after putting Sophia and Liam to bed, Clara sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. For the first time in weeks, she felt she had a purpose. She spent hours reorganizing the drawings in her portfolio, redoing strokes she thought were imperfect, scribbling down new ideas and planning how she would present her story the next day. She knew she needed to prepare, because Leonard Hayes didn't seem like the kind of man who would give a second chance. The next morning, Clara got up before dawn. After putting on an old but well-kept blazer and tying her hair up in a tight bun, she took one last look in the mirror. She didn't feel confident, but at least she looked presentable. "It's just one more step, Clara. Just breathe," she told herself, before picking up her bag and leaving the house. When she arrived at the Hayes Industries building, she felt small and intimidated. It was an imposing skyscraper, all glass, shining against the blue sky. The reception area looked like something out of a movie. White marble, leather chairs, and impeccably dressed receptionists. Clara gave her name, almost stammering, and was told to wait. She felt every second drag by as she waited on the sofa. When she was finally called into Leonard's office, her hands were sweaty and her heart seemed to hammer in her chest. "Clara," he said, rising from his desk to greet her. Leonard looked even more imposing in his surroundings, surrounded by minimalist furniture and a breathtaking view of the city. "Have a seat. I want to hear more about you." Clara talked about her designs, her passion for fashion from a young age, and how she had put everything aside to build a family. As she spoke, she felt exposed, as if she was showing more than just her interrupted career. She was exposing her failure, her abandonment, her pain. "Your drawings have emotion," Leonard said, leafing through the portfolio with a concentrated expression. "I see potential here, but technique is lacking. You need training, Clara." She felt her heart sink. So that was it? Had he called her there just to tell her she wasn't good enough? But before despair could overwhelm her, Leonard continued. "Luckily, we have a training program for new talent. I want you to take part. It's intensive, demanding, but you'll learn what you need to, and who knows, you might end up working here." What do you say? Clara felt a wave of relief and at the same time, fear. A course? She wanted to say yes immediately, but she knew it would complicate her routine with her children. The program would require total dedication, and she would need to balance that with raising Sophia and Liam. I accept, she said, her voice firm, even though inside she was full of doubts. The next few days were a rush. Clara enrolled in the program and began to divide her time between her classes and her responsibilities as a mother. Her mornings were spent in a design studio, learning sewing and pattern-making techniques. Her evenings were dedicated to the children, helping with homework and preparing meals. In the little time that remained, she studied or drew. There was no room to think about Victor, or the betrayal that had destroyed her life, and perhaps that was a blessing. Being busy was the only thing that kept her going, but not everything was easy. One day, as she was rushing to pick up the children from school after a lesson, she received an unexpected call. It was the principal of Liam's school. He had started fighting with other children and was becoming increasingly aggressive. "He misses his father," said the principal with an almost accusatory tone. Clara felt tears burning in her eyes but took a deep breath. She knew she couldn't collapse. She had to be strong for her children. Over the next few weeks, Clara dedicated herself even more to the course. She knew she was sacrificing, but she couldn't fail. Not this time. During a practical lesson, the instructor asked the students to create a sketch of a collection that represented their lives. Clara picked up her pencil and began to draw frantically. When she had finished, she looked at the paper and realized that she had put all her pain and resilience there. It was a collection that told her story, from abandonment to reconstruction. Pieces with bold but delicate cuts, with fabrics that seemed to dance between strength and fragility. Leonard, who had decided to make a surprise visit to class that day, picked up her drawing and looked at it in silence. Clara didn't know what to expect. He was serious, almost impenetrable. Finally, he looked at her and said, "You're on the right track. Keep it up. Tomorrow, I want to talk to you in my office." It was a small compliment, but it meant the world to Clara. She left class that day feeling something she hadn't felt for a long time, hope. But Clara still didn't know that, at the same time as she was trying to rebuild her life, there was something going on behind the scenes at Hayes Industries. Something that was about to turn her life upside down once again. The next day, the silence that filled Leonard Hayes's luxurious office was broken only by the soft ticking of a golden clock on his desk. Clara was sitting in the leather chair opposite him, her hands resting restlessly in her lap. Leonard was looking at the sketches of the collection she had presented the day before. His eyebrows were slightly furrowed, but his eyes shone with something Clara couldn't identify. After what seemed like an eternity, he placed the papers on the table and leaned forward, folding his hands. "Clara," he began, his voice deep and full of seriousness, "I saw something here that made me believe that this collection has the potential to be a game-changer for Hayes Industries. Your ideas, they are different, daring, but at the same time they carry emotion. That's what the market needs, authenticity." Clara blinked a few times, trying to process what he was saying. Leonard continued, "I want to launch this collection, not in a few months, but as soon as possible. But for that, I'm going to need your total dedication. It won't be easy. We'll be racing against time, facing obstacles, and you'll be tested in every way." He paused as if to gauge her reaction. "But I believe you're capable of making it happen. What do you say?" Clara felt her heart racing. It was a mixture of excitement and fear. For years, she had been just the housewife who Victor said didn't understand the real world, the woman who had put her own dreams aside to live someone else's life. Now, someone like Leonard Hayes was trusting her to lead something so big, so significant. I accept," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady, even though she felt she was about to fall apart. "Good," Leonard said with a slight smile. "But remember, Clara, this is your chance to prove that you're much more than people expect. Don't let me down." Clara left the office feeling a mixture of joy and fear. She knew she couldn't fail. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Leonard had put together a small team to help her bring the collection to life, but most of the work fell to her. Between selecting fabrics, adjusting patterns, and approving every detail, Clara barely had time to breathe. Evenings that used to be spent tidying the house or helping Sophia and Liam with their homework now turned into overtime at the Hayes Industries atelier. The tiredness was overwhelming, but Clara knew she couldn't let this opportunity slip away. One afternoon, after more than 10 hours of work, Clara came home exhausted, but found something that made her heart stop for a moment. Victor's car was parked in front of her house. Next to it, a stunning young blonde woman dressed in designer clothes held a small handbag that probably cost more than Clara would earn in a month. She took a deep breath before getting out of the car. Sophia and Liam were already in the garden, excited by the presence of their father, who was hugging them both like he was the best dad in the world. "Clara," Victor said as soon as he saw her. He looked casual, as if nothing had gone wrong between them. As if he hadn't destroyed her life months ago. "I wanted to talk to you." Clara crossed her arms and kept a firm posture, although inside she was trembling. "This is Charlotte," he said, indicating the blonde woman, who nodded with a smile that Clara found irritatingly perfect. "We're together now." Clara felt as if she'd been punched in the stomach. It wasn't just that he had moved on so quickly. It was the fact that he was there in his house with his new girlfriend, as if he expected her to simply accept everything without question. "Victor, what do you want?" asked Clara, trying to keep her voice steady. "Well, Charlotte and I are planning a trip to Florida. I thought it would be good to take the children with us. They could spend some time with me, get to know Charlotte and enjoy themselves a bit." Clara was speechless. He wanted to take his children on a trip with his new girlfriend, the woman he had destroyed his marriage for. It was too much. For a moment, she wanted to scream, to say that he had no right to ask for something like that. But she stopped herself. Liam and Sophia looked at her with eyes bright with anticipation. They missed their father, she knew that, and, as much as it hurt, maybe it would be good for them to spend some time with Victor. And if she was honest with herself, she knew it would also be good to have a few days to focus entirely on work. "Okay," she said, her voice firm, even though her heart felt tight. "But only for a few days." Victor smiled, satisfied, and began to make plans with the children. Clara stood in the doorway watching the scene as if she were a stranger in her own life. When Victor left with Charlotte, taking the children to spend the weekend before the trip, Clara entered the house and sat in the living room, staring into the emptiness. The silence was deafening. She felt the tears welling up, but refused to indulge in sadness for long. She couldn't afford to collapse now. There was a collection to finish, deadlines to meet. With a deep sigh, Clara got up and went back to work. Over the next few days, she plunged headlong into the project. The collection was taking shape, and as the pieces were finished, she began to feel a sense of pride that she hadn't experienced for a long time. Leonard often visited her in the studio, watching her progress. Despite his usual seriousness, Clara began to notice small moments of encouragement in his comments, such as when he complimented a specific dress she had designed. "This one," he said, holding the garment in his hands. "That says something. This is what we're looking for, Clara. Keep it up." She treasured those words, using them as fuel to keep going even on the most exhausting of nights. When Victor returned from his trip with the children, Clara noticed something different. He looked uncomfortable, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Charlotte wasn't with him, and that puzzled her, but she didn't ask. "It was nice to spend time with them," said Victor, avoiding her gaze. "But I think they miss you more than they realize." Clara didn't answer. She was too exhausted, emotionally and physically, to enter into any kind of discussion. She just thanked him for bringing the children back safely and went to bed, letting him leave without another word. The days passed quickly, and the date for the launch of the collection was approaching. Clara knew that all her efforts would culminate in that moment. Every detail, every stitch, every design decision represented not only her dedication, but her journey to that point. The next day, the sun had barely risen when Clara heard the doorbell ring. She was finishing preparing breakfast for Sophia and Liam, while thinking about the long list of tasks she had in the studio. With the children bustling around, it was almost easy to forget the pain she still carried in her heart, until she opened the door and saw Victor standing there. "Victor, what are you doing here so early?" she asked in surprise, while trying to keep her voice neutral. He looked haggard. The suit that used to always be impeccable was now crumpled, and there were deep circles under his eyes. Clara could recognize that look. A wounded man. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low, as if it was laden with something he didn't want to admit. Clara hesitated but let him in. He went into the living room and sat down on the sofa, while Clara crossed her arms and waited. "Charlotte left me," he began, letting out a heavy sigh. Clara felt her stomach turn but kept her composure. "She said I was putting too much pressure on her, that she didn't have the patience to deal with the children, that I should have sorted out my life before putting her in that situation," Victor continued, looking away. "The truth is that I ruined everything, Clara. With her, with you, with our family." For a moment, Clara felt a flash of pity. He looked like a broken man, different from the confident, arrogant Victor who had broken her heart months ago. But she also knew that this vulnerability came from another abandonment, not genuine regret. "Victor, I'm sorry you're going through this," she said, carefully choosing her words, "but you've made your choices. I don't know what you expect me to do." "Clara, I see how you've changed. You seem different, more strong. I didn't know you had all that strength," he confessed, and his tone was almost admiring. Clara felt her jaw clench. She knew where this was going. Victor was needy and seeking comfort, but she wouldn't fall into that trap again. "Victor," she said firmly, "don't mistake my strength for any possibility of reconciliation. I'm focused on my work, my life, and rebuilding what you destroyed. I'm not going back." He remained silent, visibly uncomfortable. It was as if he didn't know what to do with the new Clara, who was no longer the woman he controlled. "I'm going to pick up the children at the weekend," he finally said, getting up to leave. "I want to spend more time with them." "Of course, they'll love it," Clara replied in a polite but distant tone. When he left, she felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The next few days were intense. The collection was almost finished, and each piece seemed to carry part of Clara's soul. She had dedicated everything to this work, and now, with the tight deadlines and mounting pressure, she barely had time to think about anything else. At the weekend, when Victor picked up the children to take them to his house, Clara saw it as an opportunity to immerse herself in the work without distractions. She knew that the success of the collection was not only a chance to prove her professional worth, but also a way to completely free herself from the weight of the past. That evening, Clara was in the Hayes Industries atelier. The space, which was usually full of people during the day, was now empty and silent. It was almost 10 p.m., and she was determined to continue working into the night. She was wearing denim shorts and a simple top, something comfortable to withstand the long hours of work. Her hair was tied up in a clumsy bun, and the only light in the room came from the lamp on her desk. She was so focused on adjusting the hem of a dress that she didn't notice when Leonard Hayes entered the atelier. He stood in the doorway, his eyes fixed on her, watching her in silence. Clara was a dedicated woman, and Leonard had known that from the start. But at that moment, seeing her standing there, her eyes squinted with concentration, and her skillful hands working on the fabric, he realized something else. She was beautiful. Not the obvious flashy beauty he was used to seeing at gala parties or on the models who walked for his company. It was a subtle, natural beauty that shone even brighter when Clara was immersed in what she loved to do. For a few minutes, Leonard stood still, admiring the scene. When Clara finally looked up and saw his figure in the distance, she almost dropped her dress to the floor. "Leonard!" she exclaimed, her cheeks flushing instantly. She was completely at ease, without makeup, dressed casually, and now she felt exposed. "I didn't know you were here." Leonard took a few steps towards her, his eyes locked on hers. He smiled, that soft smile that was rare, but always seemed to disarm her. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said. "I just stopped by to see how things were going. But to be honest, you're much more dedicated than I expected. I don't see many professionals with that determination, Clara." She swallowed, trying to ignore the heat rising in her face. But then Leonard surprised her even more. "You're also much prettier than you look," he said, his tone calm, but his eyes roaming up and down her body before returning to hers. "Maybe you don't realize it, but it's true." Clara felt a shiver run up her spine. It had been a long time since anyone had complimented her like that. Ever since Victor had betrayed her, she had lost confidence in herself, both as a woman and as a person. And now, hearing something like that from Leonard Hayes, a man so powerful, so imposing, moved her in a way she couldn't explain. "Thank you," she murmured, looking away, unable to hold back the blush taking over her face. She quickly picked up a shirt from the chair and put it on over her top, trying to regain her composure. Leonard, however, didn't seem at all bothered. He just kept staring at her, looking like he knew exactly the impact he was making. "So, how are we doing with the collection?" he asked, changing his tone to something more professional, but still keeping his gaze intense. Clara took a deep breath, trying to reorganize her thoughts. "We're almost there. There are just a few final adjustments to be made. If all goes well, it'll be ready before the deadline." Leonard nodded, satisfied. "Good. I want you to know that regardless of the outcome, you've already proved something important, Clara. That you're capable of overcoming any obstacle. That's more valuable than you realize." His words, although simple, resonated deeply with her. Leonard was a man who hardly paid compliments gratuitously, and hearing this from him meant much more than she could admit. "Thank you, Leonard. I won't let you down," she said firmly. He gave a small smile before turning to leave. "I know you won't," he said, and then, as if it were a final thought, added, "Good night, Clara." Clara stood in the studio for a few minutes after he left, feeling her heart beating faster than it should. There was still a lot of work to do, but at that moment something inside her changed. Clara drove home that night, her thoughts immersed in the scene that had unfolded in the studio. The image of Leonard, standing in the soft light of the room, praising her beauty and her dedication, seemed to repeat itself in her mind like a song she couldn't turn off. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her like that, with genuine admiration, not just for her looks, but for who she was, for her work. But at the same time, insecurity whispered in her ear. Leonard Hayes was a man who could have any woman he wanted. Models, actresses, stunning women who looked like they'd stepped straight off a magazine cover. But what about her? She was just Clara, a woman who had been left behind by a husband who left her for someone younger and more interesting. Clara sighed deeply as she parked her car in front of her house. Closing her eyes for a moment, she promised herself that she wouldn't let these thoughts distract her. Leonard was her boss. He was kind, perhaps even charming, but that meant nothing. Powerful men like him didn't look at ordinary women like her. But that night, as she lay in bed, his voice echoed in her mind. "You're much prettier than you look." And for the first time in years, Clara allowed herself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, there was something more behind that compliment. The next morning, Clara woke up determined to make the most of the day. It was Saturday, but she knew she couldn't miss a beat. With her children at Victor's house, the studio was her place of refuge. And perhaps, she couldn't deny it to herself, part of her motivation for returning to work was the possibility of running into Leonard again. She opened her closet and ran her fingers through her clothes, looking for something different. After a few minutes, she found a dress she hadn't worn for a while, a navy blue model that gently molded her curves and fell to her knees. It wasn't extravagant, but there was something about it that made her feel confident and powerful. After carefully arranging herself, Clara looked into the mirror and saw something different reflected back at her. She was a woman who was beginning to rediscover her own beauty and strength. She put some soft lipstick on her lips, loosened her hair, which she usually kept in a bun, and left the house with a renewed sense of purpose. When she arrived at the studio, Clara noticed that it was busier than usual for a Saturday. There was lively chatter in the corridors and some voices seemed louder than usual. She didn't pay much attention, focusing on her work, but as she passed the fitting area, she heard a conversation that made her stop. "Have you seen the model who arrived? They say she's close to Mr. Hayes." "Close? What do you mean?" "Well, nobody knows for sure, but you know how these rich men are. Leonard is discreet, but look at her. It wouldn't be surprising." Curious, Clara looked into the fitting room and saw a stunning woman trying on a piece from the collection. The model was tall, with golden hair that seemed to shine in the light. Her features were perfect, and she carried an elegance that made everyone around her seem insignificant. Clara felt her heart squeeze. Of course, she thought to herself. That's the kind of woman who suits Leonard Hayes. Not me. No matter what he said yesterday, he'd never be interested in someone like me. The dress she was wearing, which minutes ago had made her feel confident, now seemed insignificant. She almost wanted to go home and hide. But, taking a deep breath, Clara remembered why she was there. Work was her priority. Leonard might be surrounded by women like that model, but she couldn't let herself get overwhelmed. As Clara returned to the studio to resume her work, Leonard arrived at the building. His presence immediately attracted attention, as it always did. He walked steadily through the corridors, impeccable in a light grey suit that seemed tailor-made to highlight his imposing posture. He greeted a few people along the way, and when he reached the room where the model was, he treated her cordially. Clara, who was standing at a distance, watched discreetly. The model was clearly keen to attract attention. She flicked her hair back, touched his arm as she spoke, and smiled with a rehearsed charm. But to Clara's surprise, Leonard remained serious. He treated her with respect, but it was clear that he didn't reciprocate her advances. Clara tried to concentrate on her work, but she couldn't help feeling a pang of relief when she saw Leonard's indifference. However, the relief was quickly replaced by insecurity. What am I doing here thinking about him? Why did I put on this dress thinking he might notice? He'll never look at me with so many women around. A few minutes later, Leonard finally entered the studio where Clara was working. She pretended not to notice him, but felt her heart race as she realized he was coming towards her. When he finally stopped near her, Clara looked up and their eyes met. For an instant, everything around them seemed to disappear. "Clara," he said, with a tone that sounded both serious and admiring, "I've never seen you look so beautiful. This dress fits you perfectly." Clara felt her cheeks blush violently. She didn't know how to react. It was as if all the insecurities that haunted her had been swept away by those words. Before she could reply, Leonard continued, "I've seen your dedication over the last few days. You've put in a lot of effort, and it hasn't gone unnoticed." He paused briefly, as if carefully choosing his next words. "I'd like to invite you to lunch today. I want to talk more about your project, and frankly, I think you deserve some time away from the sewing machines." Clara was speechless. Leonard Hayes, the most powerful man she knew, was inviting her to lunch, and not as part of a formal office meeting. She nodded, trying to hide her nervousness. "Of course, I'd love to." As Leonard led her out of the studio, Clara noticed the curious looks from the other employees, including the model, who looked surprised and even slightly annoyed. It was as if no one there had expected Leonard to choose Clara to accompany him. Lunch was at an elegant restaurant in the city centre. Leonard, despite his always impeccable posture, seemed more relaxed there. He asked questions about the collection, Clara's inspirations, and even her personal life. "You look different, Clara," he said at one point. "Not just because of the dress, but you have something in your eyes, a strength I didn't see when we first met." Clara swallowed, feeling a mixture of emotion and vulnerability. "Maybe it's because for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm reconnecting with who I really am." Leonard smiled, a rare smile that Clara realized was reserved only for special moments. As they talked, Clara realized that Leonard wasn't just a powerful and successful man. He was caring, intelligent, and, in a way, seemed to see something in her that no one else did. But at the same time, Clara knew she had to be careful. Leonard was a man from another world, a world she still wasn't sure she could or should be a part of. "You've really exceeded all my expectations, Clara," Leonard said, putting his cutlery down on his plate. His gaze was intense, direct. "It's rare to find someone with so much talent and at the same time so much passion for what they do. It seems that every piece of yours carries a piece of your soul." Clara smiled nervously. It was as if Leonard could see through her, beyond the work, beyond the clothes. He made her feel like she was special. "Thank you, Leonard. But, to be honest, sometimes I feel like an imposter. I'm surrounded by such experienced people, and here I am trying to recapture a dream I thought I'd never get another chance at." Leonard leaned slightly on the table, coming closer to her. "Don't underestimate yourself, Clara. The world is full of people with degrees and experience, but empty of people with your determination and authenticity. You have something that can't be learned on any course." Clara looked away, feeling her face heat up. Her heart was beating so fast that it seemed to be trying to escape from her chest. "What about your ex-husband?" Leonard asked suddenly, changing the tone of the conversation. He was curious but kept his voice soft, as if to gauge the impact of the question. "It seems he still comes around a lot. How do you deal with it?" Clara looked at him, surprised by the sudden change of subject. She took a deep breath, settling her napkin in her lap as she searched for the right words. "Victor, it's complicated," she began. "We have 2 children, so he'll always be part of my life in one way or another. But Honestly, he doesn't affect me like he used to. I think for a long time, I let him define me. I was his wife, the mother of his children, but now I'm trying to find out who I am beyond all that. Leonard watched her intently, her every word seeming to grab his attention even more. That explains a lot, he said, with a small smile. The strength I see in you, Clara, comes from that journey, and I admire that. Clara felt something tighten in her chest, but it wasn't sadness. It was as if, for the first time, someone was seeing the real Clara. And that was both frightening and comforting. When they returned to the studio, Clara felt that something had changed. The space that had once seemed cold and professional now had a different energy, as if Leonard's presence had made everything lighter, more personal. He helped her go over some details of the collection before leaving, and Clara continued working until late. On Sunday, Clara woke up determined to get to work in the studio. Her children were still with Victor, and she wanted to use every spare minute to refine the last details of the collection. Working was the best way to keep her mind focused, and in a way, she felt more alive there than anywhere else. When she arrived at the studio, the building was practically empty. Only a few support staff were present, but Clara preferred it that way. She put on her headphones and immersed herself in her work, adjusting a dress that still didn't look perfect. Around noon, the ring of her cell phone startled her. It was Leonard. Clara quickly took off her headphones and looked at the screen in surprise. He had never called before. Their interactions always took place in the studio or, occasionally, by email. "Leonard," she answered, trying to hide the nervousness in her voice. "Clara, good morning." His voice sounded as warm as it had the night before. "I know it's Sunday, but I thought you might be without the children. I'd like to invite you to lunch again." Clara cracked a small smile. "Actually, I'm in the studio. I couldn't stay away from work." "Of course you are," Leonard said with a low laugh. "Your dedication knows no bounds, but in that case, I think I'll come over. I can't let you skip lunch." Before Clara could protest, Leonard ended the call. About half an hour later, he showed up at the studio, carrying 2 bags from a nearby Italian restaurant. "I told you needed to eat," he joked, placing the bags on a table. Clara couldn't help the smile that formed on his face. "Are you always this insistent?" "When I believe in something, yes," he replied, with a twinkle in his eye. The two of them sat down to eat in a corner of the studio. The atmosphere was much more relaxed than in the restaurant the day before. Leonard made occasional jokes, some about himself, others about funny situations in the fashion world. Clara found herself laughing, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. "You have a great sense of humor," she said between laughs. "Not many people notice that," Leonard replied, smiling. "But I think that's because most people only pay attention to the serious, impassive CEO. With you, it's different." Clara felt his words echo in her mind. "With you, it's different." She tried to focus away, but at one point, as the two of them reached into the same bag for cutlery, their hands touched. It was only a second, but Clara felt a shiver run up her spine. Leonard also seemed to notice. For a moment, the light atmosphere was replaced by something more intense, but as if they had both decided at the same time to ignore what had just happened, they went back to talking about work. At the end of the afternoon, Leonard insisted on taking her home. Clara tried to refuse, but he said he was already heading that way. On the way, the conversation flowed naturally, but there was something different in the air. A tension, a connection that neither of them verbalized, but which was impossible to deny. When they arrived at Clara's house, Leonard stopped the car and looked at her for a few seconds before saying, "You're really amazing, Clara." She thanked him, trying not to blush, and got out of the car. She entered the house feeling strangely excited, as if something new was blossoming inside her. A short while later, the sound of a car parking caught her attention. It was Victor bringing the children back. Clara opened the door and saw Sophia and Liam running out of the car towards her. "Hi, my loves," she said, hugging them tightly. But then she saw Charlotte getting out of the car, all smiles. Victor looked like a lovesick fool, helping her carry a small bag, while looking at her as if she were the only important thing in the world. Clara just watched. It was already clear that Victor had tried to get close to her again, because Charlotte had probably left him before, but now that she was back, he seemed deluded again. After a few polite words, Victor and Charlotte left. But before they went inside, the children dropped the bombshell. "Dad says he's going to marry Charlotte," Sophia exclaimed excitedly. Clara was momentarily speechless. She felt something she couldn't identify, a mixture of surprise and discomfort. But to her own surprise, she realized that she wasn't jealous. She had spent so much time focused on her own journey, and of course on the moments with Leonard, that Victor and Charlotte now seemed irrelevant. She hugged her children once more and thought to herself, "I'm not the same Clara you left, Victor, and as much as you think you have control over my life, that ended a long time ago." The day of the collection launch had finally arrived. It was as if the fashion world had stopped to witness the big moment for Hayes Industries, and of course for Clara herself. The event was being held in one of the most prestigious salons in New York, with a red carpet full of influencers, journalists, renowned stylists and fashion critics. The lights shone brightly, reflecting off the venue's crystal chandeliers, while cameras flashed non-stop, recording every detail. Clara arrived at the event with her heart racing. She was wearing a dress that she had designed herself, an elegant and sophisticated model, but which still carried the simplicity that reflected her essence. It was the piece she loved most from the collection, the same one she had sewn with tears in her eyes, remembering all the difficulties she had faced. When she entered the salon, she felt all eyes on her. For the first time, she didn't feel intimidated. Leonard was standing near the entrance, looking impeccable in his black suit. When his eyes met Clara's, he gave her a slight smile, but one that carried an indescribable admiration. He walked over to her, offering his arm. "You look stunning," he said, looking her up and down, his voice low and full of sincerity. "Thank you," Clara replied, her cheeks blushing slightly. The fashion show began shortly afterwards. The models walked down the catwalk showing off the pieces from the collection, and the audience's reaction was immediate. Enthusiastic applause, expressions of surprise and approval. Each piece told a story, and Clara felt her heart beat with emotion as she realized that her work was touching so many people. Social media exploded with positive comments. Influencers posted videos of the fashion show, highlighting the boldness and authenticity of the collection. Critics who rarely praised anything relented, calling the line revolutionary and a breath of life in contemporary fashion. When the show was over, Leonard took to the stage to thank everyone. He was holding a microphone, but his eyes were fixed on Clara. "Today," he began, his voice firm and full of enthusiasm, "is a historic day for Hayes Industries. And none of this would be possible without the person who made this collection a reality. Someone who faced unimaginable challenges, who put their soul into every detail, and who brought something the fashion world hadn't seen for a long time. Truth." He paused, and the whole room seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a gesture, he indicated Clara. "Clara Sullivan, this collection is yours. Today's success belongs to you." The audience erupted into applause, some even standing up to cheer her on. Clara felt tears welling up in her eyes, but kept her posture as everyone around her applauded and shouted their praises. Leonard came down from the stage and walked over to her, taking her hand and leading her to the center of the hall, as if he wanted the whole world to see her. At that moment, Clara realized that she had reached a place she had never imagined possible. It wasn't just professional success, it was something much greater, the conquest of herself. After the event, Leonard organized a dinner to celebrate with the team. It was at an exclusive restaurant reserved just for them. Clara, now surrounded by praise and recognition, was overjoyed. She looked like a completely transformed woman, confident, elegant, and undeniably powerful. While everyone chatted and toasted, it was impossible to ignore the way Leonard looked at Clara. His eyes sparkled, as if he was seeing something that no one else was, and Clara felt it too. Every time their gazes met, the atmosphere seemed to take on a different energy, something intimate, almost palpable. After dinner, when his colleagues began to say goodbye, Leonard approached her. "Clara, I'd like to extend the evening a little. Shall we go for a walk, or maybe go somewhere quieter?" Clara hesitated for a moment, but the smile on his face was impossible to resist. "I'd love to," she replied, feeling her heart race. The two ended up in a sophisticated bar in the city center. The atmosphere was cozy, with soft lights and background music. Leonard ordered champagne and the two toasted the success of the collection. As the evening progressed, Clara felt more and more at ease. Leonard had an amazing sense of humor, and his light-hearted comments made her laugh in a way she hadn't laughed for a long time. They shared stories, talked about dreams, about challenges, and at some point, Clara realized that she was opening up to him in a way she had never imagined. The moments of relaxation, however, were punctuated by something deeper. On several occasions, their hands touched accidentally, or perhaps not so accidentally. Each touch seemed to carry an electric charge, a shiver that ran through them both. Finally, Leonard looked at Clara in a way she had never seen before. He leaned in slightly, and Clara knew what was about to happen. When his lips touched hers, it was as if the world stopped. The kiss was gentle, but charged with emotion. It wasn't just desire, it was something more intense, more real. When the kiss ended, Leonard looked her in the eye, still holding her hand. "Clara, I need to tell you something," he began, his voice firm. "From the day I saw you for the first time, I knew there was something about you that I needed to discover. You're not like anyone I've ever met. You're the woman of my life, and if you let me, I want to be by your side. I want to get to know you even more. I want to support you in everything." Clara felt the tears come back to her eyes, but this time they were tears of pure happiness. She didn't know what to say. All she could do was smile and hold his hand tighter. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Victor and Charlotte were watching the evening news. The headlines about the success of Clara's collection were everywhere: newspapers, magazines, the internet. Charlotte seemed more interested than Victor, commenting on the pieces and the critical praise. Victor, however, feigned indifference. "It's just a collection," he said, trying to sound disinterested. But inside, he felt something eating away at him. He knew he had lost something that he would never get back. Clara was now a woman he barely recognized, strong, confident, admired by everyone. And he couldn't deny that he had made the biggest mistake of his life by leaving her. Victor and Charlotte's relationship continued to be unstable, with constant quarrels and reconciliations. But seeing Clara's success, Victor began to realize that while he and Charlotte were trapped in a toxic cycle, Clara was flourishing. Over the next few days, Clara and Leonard grew closer and closer. It was impossible to deny the connection that existed between them. He supported her in everything, and Clara, for the first time in years, felt that she had found someone who saw her for who she really was. They started working together even more, developing new projects and dreaming about the future. For Clara, it was as if her life had finally taken a turn for the better. And although she knew she would still face challenges, Clara was sure that, with Leonard by her side, nothing would be impossible. After a few months, he asked her to marry him. Clara and Leonard's wedding was an event worthy of fairy tales. The ceremony took place in a beautiful garden by the sea, with white flowers covering every corner, an impeccable blue sky, and a light breeze that seemed tailor-made for that day. Clara wore a stunning dress, designed by herself, which reflected her essence, elegant, strong, and full of life. Leonard, in his impeccable suit, couldn't take his eyes off her, as if it was the first time he had seen her. Sophia and Liam were thrilled to be by their mother's side. They took part in every detail of the wedding, carrying the rings and holding Clara's hands as they walked down the aisle. For them, Leonard was already much more than their mother's husband. He was a father figure who did everything with love, patience, and genuine joy. After the exchange of vows, Leonard, his voice firm but full of emotion, said, "Clara, you've changed my life in a way I never imagined. From the first day I saw you, I knew there was something special about you. Today, not only do I promise you love and respect, but I promise to take care of you and the children as if they were my own. We're a family now, and you're my home." Clara felt the tears roll down her cheeks as she held his hands. She knew those words came from the heart, and her happiness was so great that it seemed almost impossible to contain. When they said, "I do," the guests gave them a standing ovation. It was clear to everyone that the love between the two of them was genuine, intense, and true. Clara had finally found her happiness, not only with a man who admired and loved her deeply, but also on her own journey of overcoming and self-discovery. The months following the wedding were like a dream. Clara and Leonard lived as a couple in love, but the basis of their relationship was built on mutual admiration and respect. Leonard not only loved Clara, but also devoted himself completely to the children. He took Sophia and Liam to school, attended parent-teacher meetings, and made a point of being present at every important activity in their lives. Afternoons were often spent in the garden of the house, an elegant and welcoming mansion that Leonard had designed to be the perfect home for the new family. He would run around the lawn with Sophia and Liam, playing catch or teaching them to play golf on a small course out the back. Clara used to watch them from the balcony, cup of coffee in hand, feeling her heart overflow with gratitude. He does things that even Victor didn't do, thought Clara. It wasn't just that Leonard was a successful millionaire. Above all, he was a dedicated man who cared deeply about her happiness and that of the children. While Clara experienced the fullness of her new marriage, Victor watched from a distance. He continued to be present in his children's lives, but in a limited way. With Charlotte showing less and less patience for the children, his visits were reduced to 2 weekends a month. And even then, Victor seemed more distracted than ever, as if he was carrying the weight of poor choices. Leonard's presence in his children's lives was evident. Sophia and Liam always spoke enthusiastically about what they had done with Leonard, the family trips, the walks in the park, the lunches where he taught them good manners, but with lightness and affection. Victor feigned indifference, but couldn't ignore the envy he felt. He saw Clara in the media all the time, magazine covers, interviews, gala events alongside Leonard. She had become a powerful, elegant, and admired woman. It was impossible not to notice how much she had changed, how much she had blossomed since he had left her. "You made the wrong choice, Victor," said Charlotte in a recent argument, irritated by the fact that he always seemed distracted. "Clara is living the life you would never have given her." He didn't reply, but he knew Charlotte was right. Clara was now more than a woman next to a millionaire CEO. She had become Leonard's partner at Hayes Industries, leading the creative team and bringing revolutionary ideas to the brand. Her designs were constantly praised, and she became one of the most respected figures in the fashion world. Despite the luxury that surrounded her, the dinners in exclusive restaurants, the trips in private jets, the tailor-made clothes, Clara never lost her essence. She remained simple, grateful, and devoted to her family. Leonard often surprised her with small gestures of love, such as leaving loving notes on the breakfast table or planning romantic getaways to heavenly destinations. But for Clara, the most special moments were the simple ones, when he helped Sophia with her homework or taught Liam to ride his bike. One quiet evening, while Clara and Leonard were sitting in the garden watching the children play, he took her hand and looked deeply into her eyes. "Clara, you know I'd do it all over again, don't you? From the first day I saw you in that cafe, I knew you would change my life. I just want you to know that for me, it doesn't matter about success, money, or anything else. You and the children are what really matter." Clara felt tears fill her eyes. Squeezing his hand, she replied, "And I'd do it all over again too, Leonard. Every mistake, every fall, because it all brought me to you, and that's worth more than anything." They kissed under the starry sky, while Liam and Sophia ran around them, laughing. Clara had finally found what she had always wanted: love, respect, family, and personal fulfillment. She knew her journey hadn't been easy, but each challenge had shaped her, made her stronger and more resilient. Victor remained present but distant. He knew that Clara had found someone much better than he could ever have been. And although he carried the weight of regret, he also knew that she deserved all the happiness in the world. Clara and Leonard lived with the certainty that their love was special, a unique connection that had transformed their lives. And together, they built a family that was not only rich in material goods, but above all in love and companionship. Clara had not only a happy ending, but the beginning of a life full of purpose and true love. What did you think of this story? Leave a rating from 1 to 10 in the comments. We want to know what you think. If you like it, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories like this one. And don't miss the videos that are appearing on your screen right now. See you next time.